The scent of brewing coffee, strong and familiar, was the first thing John Miller registered each morning, a comforting anchor in the meticulously ordered world he had built. Sunlight, pale and hesitant, filtered through the blinds of his Oak Haven apartment, casting long geometric shadows across the polished hardwood floors. There was no bustling kitchen, no companionable chatter, just the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the rhythmic drip of the coffee maker. His life, as a veteran police officer in the quiet, tree-lined suburban town, was a carefully constructed fortress of routine and public service. He was known throughout Oak Haven as Officer Miller, a pillar of calm in a community that rarely experienced anything beyond petty disputes and the occasional fender bender. His colleagues respected his cool head and his uncanny ability to diffuse a shouting match with a quiet word, a subtle shift in posture. He rarely raised his voice, and his presence alone seemed to instill a sense of order. To the residents, he was the steady, reassuring face of the law, always ready with a kind word or a helpful hand. But beneath the polished uniform and the composed exterior, John lived a life of deliberate solitude. His mornings unfolded with the precision of a well-oiled machine. After coffee, strong and black, he'd head to the precinct gym, the rhythmic thump of his running shoes on the treadmill a solitary counterpoint to the quiet dawn. His body, though nearing 50, remained lean and powerful, honed by years of discipline and an almost obsessive need for control. Back in his apartment, he'd shower, the steam momentarily blurring the reflection of a face that, despite the lines of age and experience, held a deep, almost ancient weariness in his eyes. His uniform, pressed and starched, felt like a second skin, a professional shield. Patrols through Oak Haven's familiar streets were often uneventful, a predictable loop of suburban tranquility. He'd wave to Mrs. Henderson tending her rose bushes, exchange a few words with Mr. Peterson at the hardware store, offer a quiet warning to teenagers loitering near the park. He knew the rhythms of the town, the hidden cul-de-sacs, the shortcut alleys. He was a part of the fabric of Oak Haven, yet he remained distinct, always maintaining a polite, professional distance. Deep connections were avoided, not out of malice, but out of a habit born from years of guarding a past that he believed was best left buried. His solitude wasn't loneliness. He rationalized. It was a chosen privacy, a necessary buffer against a world that might, given the chance, pry open old wounds. Evenings were the quietest, the true testament to his carefully curated isolation. He'd return to his apartment, the silence greeting him like an old friend. Dinner was usually a simple affair: grilled chicken, steamed vegetables, eaten in front of the television, the muted flicker of the news filling the empty space. There was no one to share the day's mundane details with, no one to discuss a difficult call or a small triumph. He found a strange peace in this quiet routine, a predictable rhythm that kept the chaos of the past at bay. Tucked away beneath a loose floorboard in his bedroom, hidden from prying eyes, lay a small, tarnished silver locket. It wasn't ornate or particularly valuable, but it was his most treasured possession. He rarely opened it, having seen its contents countless times over the decades. It held a faded, creased photograph of a young woman with a defiant spark in her eyes, and on the other side, a lock of hair, the color of midnight. The locket carried the faint, almost imperceptible scent of old leather and damp earth, a scent that conjured fleeting, bittersweet memories. He would often touch it in moments of quiet reflection, running his thumb over its cool, smooth surface, a small, private ritual that connected him to a part of his life he never spoke of, a part that held a profound, unspoken significance. This locket was a small, seemingly unimportant detail, a seed of mystery from a deeply guarded past. One particularly blustery Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day where the sky hung low and bruised, and a persistent drizzle coated everything in a dull sheen. John was on his usual patrol route, cruising down Elm Street. The rhythm of his windshield wipers was the only sound beyond the low rumble of the engine. He was thinking about the upcoming budget meeting, a dull affair, when his eyes caught a flicker of movement in the ditch by the roadside. It was small, dark, and shivering. He pulled his cruiser over, the tires crunching on the wet gravel. Stepping out, the cold, damp air immediately chilled him to the bone, but he barely noticed. Lying huddled against a pile of wet leaves was a tiny puppy, its fur matted and soaked, its ribs clearly visible beneath its thin coat. The creature trembled violently, its whimpers barely audible above the drumming rain. It was clearly abandoned, left to the mercy of the elements. Without a moment's hesitation, John walked over, his heavy police boots making soft indentations in the muddy earth. He knelt down, ignoring the cold seeping into his uniform. He reached into his patrol bag, pulling out his spare, clean jacket, a lightweight thermal one he kept for emergencies. Gently, with movements surprisingly tender for a man of his build, he wrapped the shivering puppy in the warm fabric, careful not to startle it further. The puppy, no bigger than his hand, nestled into the warmth, its trembling slowly subsiding. "There you go, little one," John murmured, his voice softer than most people in Oakhaven had ever heard it. He carefully cradled the puppy in one arm, its tiny body barely a weight. Instead of continuing his patrol, or simply calling animal control, John rerouted his cruiser directly to the Oakhaven Animal Shelter. He personally carried the puppy inside, ensuring it was handed over to a warm, capable technician, filled out the necessary paperwork, and even left a small, anonymous donation for its care. He stayed for a few minutes, watching through the glass as the technician carefully dried the puppy and offered it a small bowl of kibble, before resuming his patrol as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. This small, spontaneous act of kindness, a quiet display of deep compassion, was his save the cat moment, a glimpse into the inherent goodness that lay beneath his guarded exterior. He didn't do it for recognition. He simply did it because it was the right thing to do. Later that same day, the rain had finally subsided, leaving the air fresh and clean. John was responding to a routine call, a minor break-in at the Gilded Relic, Oakhaven's oldest and most prestigious antique shop. A few antique snuff boxes had been reported missing. As he pushed open the heavy oak door of the shop, the familiar scent of old wood, dust, and forgotten history filled his nostrils. He expected to find Mrs. Gable, the shop owner, flustered and a little bewildered. Instead, a figure was already there, speaking animatedly with Mrs. Gable near the display case. It was a man, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit despite the damp weather, with slicked back dark hair and an air of cultured refinement that seemed out of place in Oakhaven. His voice, smooth and resonant, carried across the quiet shop. As the man turned, his eyes, sharp and calculating, met John's. A jolt, cold and visceral, shot through John. Time seemed to warp, the sounds of the shop fading into a distant hum. The man's face, etched with age but still strikingly familiar, triggered a cascade of buried memories. It couldn't be. Not here. Not now. His carefully constructed wall of calm fractured, if only for a split second. The man offered a small, almost imperceptible smile. A smile that didn't reach his eyes. A smile that John recognized from a past he had fought so desperately to escape. The scent of old leather and forgotten earth from the locket under his floorboard seemed to intensify, a phantom echo of a life he thought he had left behind forever. This completely unexpected encounter was the prelude, the first crack in the facade, stirring a deep, unsettling unease within John that promised to unravel everything. The unexpected encounter at the Gilded Relic had left a bitter taste in John's mouth, a phantom chill that lingered long after he had concluded his report and left the antique shop. Elias Thorne. The name, unuttered, echoed in the silent chambers of his mind. A relic from a life John had meticulously buried beneath layers of routine and respectability. What was Thorne doing here, in Oakhaven, a town so far removed from the shadowy world they once inhabited? The question gnawed at him, a splinter under the skin of his carefully constructed piece. The uneasy premonition that something fundamental was about to shift in his meticulously ordered world proved disturbingly accurate. The catalyst arrived not as a sudden explosion, but as a series of insidious tremors that slowly began to fracture the bedrock of his stable existence. It began with the news bulletin, a local headline that blared across every television screen in Oakhaven art forgeries rock, Oakhaven elite priceless masterpieces discovered to be fakes. The first victim was Bartholomew Bart Finch, a prominent local collector known for his eccentricities and his exquisite, though often secretly acquired, collection of European masterpieces. John knew Finch well. He was one of the many wealthy patrons who had generously funded Oakhaven's community initiatives, often interacting with John during charity events. The theft wasn't a crude break-in, it was a sophisticated swap. The genuine articles replaced with meticulously crafted forgeries. John visited Finch's sprawling estate on the outskirts of town, the scene now a buzzing hive of forensic technicians and art appraisers. As he surveyed the empty spaces on the walls where priceless paintings once hung and examined the crude copies left in their stead, a cold dread began to coil in his stomach. The initial reports detailed the forgery's startling accuracy, not just in artistic style, but in the use of historically accurate pigments, aging techniques, and even microscopic canvas imperfections. But it was the specific details that sent a shiver down John's spine, a jolt of unsettling familiarity that resonated deep within his suppressed memory. The subtle, almost imperceptible discoloration along the edge of a supposedly Renaissance-era Madonna, mimicking a unique aging process caused by a specific type of early Italian varnish. The microscopic crackle pattern on a presumed Dutch still life, a signature of a rare drying agent known only to a handful of expert forgers. The use of a particular, almost extinct type of linen canvas for a landscape, sourced from a clandestine supplier in Eastern Europe. These weren't general knowledge, they were the granular, meticulous specifics of a highly specialized world. A world John had once been intimately involved in during his dark history, as a key player in an operation that dealt in rare, often ethically ambiguous, art acquisitions and authentications, a polite term for validating pieces that skirted the edges of legality. He had possessed, and still subtly possessed, this knowledge, though he had buried it deep. And then, Elias Thorne began to appear. Not overtly, not threateningly, but always there. A fleeting glimpse of him outside Finch's estate, ostensibly talking to a news reporter, a brief encounter in the coffee shop, where Thorne would exchange a knowing, almost conspiratorial glance with John, before melting back into the crowd. He was a chameleon, a shadow. Each time, Thorne left behind a subtle, cryptic clue, a personalized taunt that only John could possibly understand. It could be a discarded newspaper with a specific section subtly underlined, referencing an old case or a forgotten code word, or a brief, whispered phrase as they passed in the street. The master's touch is unmistakable, isn't it? John, each interaction, each clue, was a cruel, calculated jab at John's buried past, a reminder of the intricate web they had once spun together, forcing him to acknowledge that Thorne was not just a coincidental witness, but an active, malicious agent. John's initial reaction was a desperate, almost visceral urge to retreat, to deny any connection. He found himself avoiding crime scenes, delegating tasks, retreating into the sterile confines of his apartment. He spent hours pacing, the locket beneath the floorboard feeling heavier than ever, its faint scent now seeming to mock him with memories he desperately wished to suppress. He tried to rationalize, to convince himself it was coincidence, a cruel twist of fate. He was Officer Miller now, a protector of Oakhaven, not the man who once navigated the murky waters of the art underworld. His internal conflict was a raging storm, the fear of exposure, the potential ruin of his carefully constructed life, battled against a primal sense of duty, a deep-seated need to protect the innocent victims of these crimes. But the intricate details of the forgeries, the sheer audacity of Thorne's provocations, left him no escape. The forgeries were too precise, too familiar. Thorne's taunts too personal. He couldn't dismiss it. The more he tried to deny the connection, the more suffocating the truth became. He knew things that no other officer in Oakhaven could possibly know. The specific anachronisms in pigment composition, the subtle brushstroke characteristics of master forgers, the telltale signs of a specific type of canvas aging. His conscience, long quieted by years of mundane policing, began to stir, demanding action. This was the point of no return. John could no longer simply be Officer Miller, the quiet, dependable cop. His past, the dark history he had fought so desperately to escape, was no longer a buried secret. It was alive, breathing, and now inextricably linked to the very crimes he was sworn to investigate. To solve the forgeries, to protect his community, he would have to confront the ghost of his former self. He would have to tap into the very knowledge he had suppressed, to use the skills he had acquired in that morally ambiguous world. The thought filled him with a potent mixture of dread and a reluctant, almost exhilarating, sense of purpose. Oakhaven, his sanctuary, was now threatened, and ironically, only the man he used to be held the key to its salvation. The game, a dangerous dance with his own demons, had begun. The art forgery case tightened its grip on Oakhaven, transforming the usually placid police precinct into a hive of frustrated activity. Detectives, typically accustomed to straightforward robberies and domestic disputes, found themselves adrift in a labyrinth of artistic technicalities. Forensic reports piled up, filled with jargon about pigment analysis and canvas threads, but offered no clear leads. The culprits were meticulous, leaving behind no discernible fingerprints, no direct digital footprints. The local art appraisers, equally baffled, could only confirm the fakes were of an unprecedented quality, almost indistinguishable from the originals to the untrained eye. John watched from the periphery, his internal torment intensifying with each dead end. He knew the answers, felt them stirring in the dark corners of his memory. But the thought of revealing his specialized knowledge filled him with dread. It wasn't just the professional risk, it was the personal shame, the fear of unraveling the carefully constructed facade of Officer Miller. He delegated tasks, offered vague advice, anything to avoid direct involvement. The frustration peaked during a critical case meeting. Captain Davies, a gruff but fair man, slammed a stack of reports onto the table. "All right, people, what do we have? Another priceless fake, another dead end. These forgeries are too good, too particular. Anyone got anything?" A detective mumbled about a potential lead on a stolen art catalog, but it felt flimsy. The room was thick with silence, punctuated by sighs of defeat. John felt the pressure building, a palpable weight in his chest. He saw the genuine distress on his colleagues' faces, the growing helplessness. And then, his eyes drifted to a photograph on the corkboard, a high-resolution image of one of the forged paintings, a meticulous copy of a rare 17th-century Dutch landscape. He saw the telltale crackle pattern, the subtle shift in the linseed oil's drying, details that screamed of a specific, obscure technique he knew well. Without thinking, the words slipped out, almost a whisper, but sharp enough to cut through the quiet. "It's the sfumato method, but with an accelerated drying agent. They would have mixed in a small quantity of amber resin with the oil. That's why the craquelure is so fine, almost like a spider web, but deeper than it should be for a piece of that age." A hush fell over the room. All eyes, including Captain Davies's, turned to John. The detail was so precise, so esoteric, that it stunned everyone. It was knowledge that no ordinary police officer, no local detective, should possess. It was John's unveiling, an accidental but undeniable exposure of his hidden skill. He hadn't sought to show off. He had been compelled by the sheer incompetence of the investigation and his inherent desire for justice. Among the bewildered faces, one pair of eyes narrowed sharply. Detective Eva Rodriguez. She was a new transfer to Oakhaven, sharp and ambitious, with a reputation for meticulous investigation. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her gaze was like a laser, missing nothing. She had already found John's reserved nature and his almost too perfect calm unsettling, a subtle anomaly in the Oakhaven force. Now, this unexpected display of specialized knowledge solidified her suspicion. Her eyebrows, usually calm, furrowed subtly, and a flicker of intense curiosity, laced with doubt, crossed her face. Who was John Miller? Really, she wondered. Her initial respect for his dedication was now tinged with a palpable sense of scrutiny. Eva Rodriguez, the misguided adversary type B, had found her focus, unbeknownst to John. As the precinct meeting was drawing to a close, Elias Thorne was meticulously executing his next move. He sat in a dimly lit upscale cafe in a neighboring city, a half-empty espresso cup before him. His fingers, long and elegant, danced across the keyboard of a burner laptop. He was accessing a secure old database, one that cataloged the obscure, often illicit provenance of certain art pieces and the shadowy figures involved in their acquisition. With a few clicks, he isolated a seemingly innocuous document, a faded invoice from a Swiss art dealer, dated 2 decades prior, for a painting that had resurfaced in a notorious, unsolved art theft case. The invoice bore a cryptic, almost invisible, stamp, a small, stylized raven. Thorne knew that only a select few, including John, would recognize that stamp as a personal mark of a very specific, now-defunct network. Thorne then carefully crafted an anonymous email to a local, sensationalist journalist, attaching a doctored, slightly blurry screenshot of the invoice. The email contained no direct accusations, merely a cryptic hint. A local hero with a shadowy past, the Oakhaven art forgeries may have deeper roots than you think. Check the records. Look for the raven. It was a cunning, calculated act designed to plant seeds of doubt, to create a ripple of suspicion without direct incrimination. Thorne's actions concretely established him as the primary antagonist, a master manipulator pulling strings from the shadows, pushing John further into the spotlight of suspicion. He wasn't just committing forgeries, he was playing a dangerous psychological game with John. Later that afternoon, after the meeting, John was back in his patrol car, trying to shake off the lingering unease of Eva Rodriguez's piercing gaze. His usual partner, Officer Reynolds, was off duty, and in his place was Officer Ben Carter. Ben was a fresh-faced, earnest rookie, barely out of the academy, with a boundless enthusiasm for police work and an almost childlike admiration for John. He was John's shadow, eager to learn, and fiercely loyal. "Officer Miller," Ben said, his voice a little awestruck. "That thing you said in the meeting, about the crackle and the resin, how did you know that it was incredible?" Even Detective Rodriguez looked surprised, and she's supposed to be, like, the best. Ben's tone was filled with genuine admiration, devoid of any suspicion. He had witnessed John's unusual insight, sensing the underlying tension, but his faith in John remained strong. John just grunted, his gaze fixed on the road. "Just a lot of reading. Ben, old hobbies." He offered a strained smile, a pathetic attempt to deflect. He felt a pang of guilt, knowing he was lying to the young officer who looked up to him so much. Ben, however, didn't press. He simply nodded, a slight frown of confusion briefly crossing his brow before he returned to scanning the street. Ben, the helper, sensed John's distress, the guardedness beneath the calm exterior, and though he couldn't quite grasp its source, he offered silent, unwavering support, a small anchor in the gathering storm of suspicion. He was a witness to John's unwilling unveiling, now caught in the wake of a dark past that was steadily catching up to his hero. The seeds of doubt planted by Elias Thorne had blossomed into a thorny vine, quickly strangling John's carefully cultivated reputation. The anonymous email, followed by the journalist's sensationalist exposé, had detonated like a bomb in the quiet town of Oakhaven. Headlines screamed local hero cop, linked to international art crime ring, exclusive. The Raven's Mark. The article, riddled with half-truths and insidious implications, presented the doctored invoice and vaguely referenced John's unexplained expertise in art forgery. The public, once admiring, now reeled in shock and betrayal. Thorne, the puppet master, didn't stop there. He escalated his attacks with chilling precision. He orchestrated a scene designed to directly frame John, choosing the precinct's impound lot as his symbolic arena. This was a place of law and order, a repository of evidence, making the accusation of tampering even more damning. One evening, under the cloak of darkness, Thorne subtly manipulated a security camera, creating a deliberate glitch that ensured only a blurry, incriminating image of John, appearing to be tampering with a seized antique, supposedly a piece of evidence in the forgery case, was captured. The image was grainy, distorted, but unmistakably John's silhouette. It wasn't direct proof, but it was enough to ignite the fire of suspicion. The next morning, the doctored footage, coupled with more leaked evidence, directly linking John to a notorious, decade-old unsolved art theft case from a distant city, a case John had indeed been involved in during his shadowy past, albeit as a reluctant, manipulated participant, landed on Captain Davies's desk. The case, known as the Obsidian Heist, had a distinct signature, one eerily similar to the Oakhaven forgeries. The internal alarm bells at the precinct screamed. Internal Affairs launched a formal, no-holds-barred investigation. The very police force John had dedicated his life to now turned on him. He was summoned to Captain Davies's office, the air thick with unspoken accusations. His badge was stripped, the heavy weight of it leaving a phantom emptiness on his chest. His service weapon, a familiar comfort, was confiscated. He was ordered to return home, confined to his apartment, his communication monitored, effectively isolated from the world he had sworn to protect. He was a prisoner in his own home, his sanctuary transformed into a cage. His reputation, once pristine, was now in tatters, smeared with the ink of scandal. Detective Ava Rodriguez, the ambitious transfer, was put in charge of the Internal Affairs investigation. Her initial suspicion had hardened into a conviction of John's guilt. Her dark eyes, usually analytical, now held a cold, unwavering intensity as she interrogated him in his apartment. She laid out the fabricated evidence, the blurry footage, the old invoice with the Raven's Mark, the undeniable parallels to the Obsidian Heist. Her voice, sharp and relentless, pressed him for answers. Each question a hammer blow against his carefully constructed lies. "Officer Miller," she stated, her voice devoid of emotion, "your knowledge of these specific forgery techniques, your connection to the Obsidian Heist, and this footage, it all paints a very clear picture. You have a choice. Cooperate fully. Tell us everything. By Friday. Or you'll face a public trial. And I assure you, with this mountain of evidence, conviction is a certainty." The deadline loomed like a guillotine. Friday. Just 4 days to clear his name. To somehow unravel Thorne's intricate web of lies. To prove his innocence against a seemingly insurmountable tide of incriminating evidence. The clock on his wall, a small, unremarkable detail of his apartment, now ticked with a deafening rhythm, emphasizing his solitude and the dwindling time. John was utterly alone in this ultimate test. The system he had served for so long was now his adversary. His colleagues, once respectful, now avoided his gaze, whispers following him like shadows. Even Officer Ben Carter, his loyal helper, was forced to keep his distance. Ben's face, when he briefly saw John being escorted from the precinct, was etched with a profound sadness and confusion, a silent plea for an explanation John couldn't give. He knew Ben's faith in him was shaken, his youthful admiration curdled by the public accusations. The young officer, bound by protocol, could offer no overt assistance. John, the man who prided himself on his self-reliance, felt the crushing weight of his isolation. His dark history, a phantom from his past, had not just caught up to him, it had consumed his present, leaving him teetering on the edge of ruin, with no one to turn to but himself. Meanwhile, Elias Thorne reveled in the chaos he had unleashed. From his hidden lair in a neighboring city, he monitored the news reports, a self-satisfied smirk playing on his lips. He saw the headlines, the public outcry, the internal investigation. He saw John Miller, the man who had dared to escape his world, trapped and exposed. Thorne wasn't just driven by profit. He was driven by a twisted sense of artistic revenge, a desire to prove his intellectual superiority and to drag John back into the shadows from which he had emerged. He imagined John's desperation, his carefully built life crumbling. He had achieved his goal. John's past was no longer secret, and now it was about to destroy him. The Friday morning sun, usually a comforting presence in Oakhaven, felt like a harsh spotlight. John Miller stood alone in his apartment, the silence amplifying the incessant ticking of his wall clock. The deadline loomed, a physical weight pressing down on him. Across town, in the Oakhaven Police Department's main hall, a makeshift stage had been erected. This was the arena for his public shaming, a televised press conference orchestrated by Internal Affairs. The world was watching, not for justice, but for a spectacle, hungry for the downfall of a local hero. He knew what they expected: a defeated man, a disgraced officer crumbling under the weight of accusations. But something had shifted inside him in the agonizing solitude of the past 4 days. The fear of exposure had not vanished, but it had been eclipsed by a cold, hard resolve. Elias Thorne had pushed him to the brink, forcing him to confront the ghost of his past, and in doing so, had inadvertently awakened a dormant strength. He was no longer just running from his history. He was ready to face it, to wield it as a weapon against the man who sought to destroy him. He dressed in his cleanest, most unadorned civilian clothes, a quiet defiance in his simplicity. He felt the phantom weight of his badge, the familiar comfort of his service weapon. But today, his only armament was the truth, unpalatable as it might be. The precinct's main hall buzzed with a tense energy. Rows of chairs filled with reporters, camera crews, and curious Oakhaven citizens stretched before a raised podium. Detective Eva Rodriguez, looking sharp and professional in her uniform, stood poised at the microphone, a stack of folders clutched in her hand, her expression grim. Captain Davies sat nearby, his face a thundercloud. As John was escorted into the hall, a ripple of whispers ran through the crowd. Flashes popped, microphones were thrust forward. He ignored them all, his gaze fixed on the podium, on the woman who was about to deliver the final blow to his career. Detective Rodriguez began, her voice clear and authoritative. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have concluded our preliminary investigation into the recent art forgeries and the concerning allegations regarding Officer John Miller, based on the evidence collected, including forensic analysis, financial records, and security footage. Internal Affairs is prepared to announce formal charges against Mr. Miller related to..." "With all due respect, Detective." John's voice cut through her statement, calm but resonant, carrying effortlessly across the hall. He hadn't raised it, but the sheer force of his presence commanded attention. Every head swiveled. Rodriguez paused, her eyes narrowing in surprise, a flicker of irritation. John stepped forward, ignoring the frantic attempts of the escorting officers to restrain him. He walked straight to the podium, his posture erect, his gaze sweeping across the bewildered faces in the crowd. "There are indeed charges to be announced today," he said, his voice gaining strength. "But they are not against me. They are against Elias Thorne, the man behind these forgeries, and the man who has meticulously attempted to frame me." A collective gasp went through the room. Reporters began shouting questions. Rodriguez, recovering quickly, interjected, "Officer Miller, you are suspended. You are not authorized to speak." "I am authorized by the truth," John countered, his eyes meeting hers, a silent challenge. And by my past. He turned to the cameras, his voice now imbued with an almost hypnotic gravitas. He began to speak, not in defense, but in exposition. He meticulously dissected Thorne's frame-up, explaining how the security camera at the impound lot had been subtly manipulated, a specific, rarely used glitch in the precinct's antiquated system, that Thorne, with his background, would know. He described the precise angle, the timing, the intentional blurriness designed to obscure the fact that the evidence he was supposedly tampering with was actually a cleverly disguised dummy, planted by Thorne himself. He then moved on to the fabricated evidence, the doctored invoice from the Swiss art dealer, the one with the stylized raven stamp. That stamp, John revealed, his voice dropping to a near whisper, drawing everyone in, is the signature of a defunct network that specialized in ethically dubious art dealings. A network I was, unfortunately, a part of many years ago. It's how I acquired the knowledge Thorne has used to frame me, and to commit these forgeries. He admitted his past, not with shame, but with a stark honesty that disarmed his critics. He spoke of the Obsidian heist, not as a crime he committed, but as an operation he was reluctantly coerced into. A dark chapter where he gained an intimate, harrowing understanding of Thorne's methods and unique artistic signatures. The holding breath moment arrived when a tenacious reporter, sensing a vulnerability, called out, "Officer Miller, if you know so much about these forgeries, prove it. Tell us, what's the distinguishing mark on the alleged 19th century etching of the Oakhaven market that you yourself identified as a fake last week?" Iso Sabon. The question hung heavy in the air. This was an obscure piece, a minor forgery among the more high-profile ones. John, for a fraction of a second, hesitated. His eyes flickered. The weight of the question, the memory of his former life, threatening to consume him. A ripple of triumphant murmurs started to spread among the skeptics in the crowd. Detective Rodriguez's lips thinned, a hint of "I knew it" in her posture. But then, a flicker of defiance ignited in John's eyes. He took a deep breath, and his voice, though quiet, cut through the rising murmur. The Oakhaven market etching. It's supposedly a work by Henri Dubois, a master of light and shadow. But the forgery, it has a unique flaw. If you look closely, with a high-powered magnifying glass, at the top right corner of the market stall's awning, you will find a tiny, almost invisible blemish in the etching plate. It's a microscopic scratch, shaped like a lightning bolt. It's not part of Dubois' original design, nor is it a sign of age. It's a deliberate flaw, a signature left by the forger. Only 2 living people, as far as I know, would be aware of that mark myself, and Elias Thorne. The camera crew zoomed in on a man standing subtly at the back of the room, near an exit. Elias Thorne. He had infiltrated the press conference, eager to witness John's public ruin. At the mention of his name, and the chillingly precise description of his hidden mark, Thorne's carefully composed facade cracked. A visible micro-expression of pure, unadulterated panic flashed across his face, a brief widening of the eyes, a tightening of the jaw, a subtle clenching of his elegant fingers. A vigilant cameraman, specifically instructed by Detective Rodriguez to keep an eye on all reactions, caught Thorne's telltale micro-expression. The footage, later reviewed, would become a crucial piece of non-verbal evidence. "Mr. Thorne," John continued, his voice now a steel trap, "I know you're here, you can confirm it, can't you? The lightning bolt. Your artistic ego demands a signature, doesn't it?" Thorne, exposed, bolted for the exit, but it was too late. Uniformed officers, alerted by Mateo, the precinct's diligent senior clerk who had witnessed the exchange, and, sensing the shift in momentum, discreetly signaled backup, moved swiftly to intercept him. And finally, John's voice boomed, now filled with the triumph of truth. The true location of the stolen art from the current Oakhaven forgeries. They're not hidden in some secret vault across the globe. They're in a disused, abandoned warehouse at the Old Mill Street Industrial Complex. Specifically, underneath the third floor's faulty ventilation shaft, in a hidden compartment behind a loose brick. Thorne's signature is in plain sight. He gave the precise coordinates. Before the press conference even ended, patrol cars were dispatched. The live feed from the precinct switched to breaking news coverage of police storming the Mill Street warehouse. Within minutes, the first images flashed across the screens, officers pulling genuine masterpieces from a hidden compartment, the very paintings reported stolen from Bartholomew Finch and other Oakhaven collectors. The real-time discovery of the stolen art, broadcast live for the world to see, became irrefutable proof. The public reaction was instantaneous and overwhelming. The murmurs of skepticism in the hall transformed into a roar of astonishment, then an explosion of spontaneous applause. Faces in the crowd, initially filled with doubt, contorted into expressions of awe, then burst into cheers and tears of admiration. Reporters, initially cynical, scrambled to update their breaking news stories, the narrative shifting from disgrace to dazzling vindication. Detective Rodriguez, standing a few feet from John, watched the live feed of the raid on a monitor. Her face, which moments ago had been grim and determined, softened, then filled with a profound sense of shock and respect. She walked over to John, her eyes shining with admiration. "Officer Miller," she said, her voice hoarse with emotion. I misjudged you. Profoundly. You have not only cleared your name, you have exposed a master criminal and brought justice to Oakhaven." She extended her hand, a gesture of profound apology and acknowledgement. "Thank you. For everything." From the back of the hall, Officer Ben Carter, his eyes wide with awe, pushed through the throng. He didn't speak, but his face, flushed with pride and overwhelming relief, mirrored the sentiments of the entire town. He simply nodded, a silent signal of his unwavering support and renewed admiration. John Miller, the ostracized officer, once on the precipice of ruin, was not just vindicated. He was recognized as a true hero, not for suppressing his past, but for courageously leveraging it for the greater good. The triumphant roar of the crowd and the flashing cameras in the precinct hall faded into a blur of vindication. John Miller, the ostracized officer, was now the acclaimed hero. But for John, the true victory lay not in the public adulation, but in the quiet, profound sense of peace that finally settled within him. The carefully constructed facade, which had once been his prison, had shattered, allowing the light of truth to flood in. Elias Thorne's meticulously crafted empire of deceit crumbled with swift and brutal efficiency. The live televised discovery of the stolen art in the Mill Street warehouse, coupled with John's detailed testimony and the irrefutable evidence of the manipulated security footage, sealed Thorne's fate. The police, armed with John's precise knowledge of Thorne's network and methods, quickly dismantled his entire operation, uncovering a vast web of forgeries, illicit sales, and money laundering that stretched across continents. Thorne, the Type A antagonist driven by an insatiable greed and a twisted sense of intellectual superiority, faced a barrage of federal charges. His theatrical flair for leaving signatures and taunting his adversaries ultimately led to his undoing. The subsequent trial was swift, his guilt undeniable. He received a lengthy prison sentence, losing not only his freedom but also his ill-gotten gains. His entire collection of genuine and forged masterpieces confiscated. His twisted legacy as a master forger and manipulator was reduced to a footnote in criminal history, his name synonymous with ruin. In the aftermath, the Oakhaven Police Department moved quickly to address the internal fallout. John, cleared of all charges, was not only reinstated with full honors but received a commendation for extraordinary bravery and insight, a testament to his unique contribution to solving the art forgery case and exposing Thorne. The public, initially swayed by sensational headlines, now held John in even higher esteem, recognizing the immense personal sacrifice he had made in confronting his past. Detective Ava Rodriguez, The ambitious transfer who had relentlessly pursued John approached him a few days after the dust had settled. Her initial arrogance and suspicion had been completely replaced by genuine remorse and a profound respect. She found him in the quiet of the precinct's archives, meticulously reorganizing old case files. "Officer Miller," she began, her voice softer than he had ever heard it. "May I have a word?" John turned, a faint, unburdened smile on his lips. "Detective Rodriguez." She looked at him directly, her dark eyes clear and steady. "John, I owe you an apology. A profound one. I misjudged you. Terribly. I was so focused on the evidence, on procedure, on my own ambition, that I failed to see the truth. I was convinced you were hiding something, and I pushed you relentlessly. I was wrong. I apologize for the doubt, for the pressure, for what I put you through." Her admission was sincere, devoid of ego, a genuine display of contrition from a Type B misguided adversary. It was a specific action that showed her remorse. John nodded, a quiet understanding passing between them. "It's all right, Detective. You were doing your job, and in a way, you helped me. You pushed me to face what I needed to face." Rodriguez's gaze lingered on him. "Your expertise, your understanding of Thorne's methods, it's unlike anything I've ever seen. We need that, John. The department needs that. The world needs that." She paused, then took a deep breath. "Captain Davies and I have been discussing it. The department is proposing a new unit, a specialized task force dedicated to combating art crime and complex financial fraud, leveraging your unparalleled understanding of that world. We want you to lead it, John, as Commander Miller." The offer was more than a job. It was a profound opportunity. A chance to transform his dark history, the very knowledge he had once buried in shame, into a powerful force for good. It wasn't just about recovering stolen art. It was about protecting people from sophisticated criminals like Thorne, about bringing justice where traditional methods failed. It was a meaningful opportunity, allowing him to utilize his unique skills, turning a past burden into a future purpose. Later that autumn, as the leaves in Oakhaven began their slow descent, painting the town in hues of gold and rust, John sat on a park bench. Beside him was Officer Ben Carter, his once fresh face now showing a hint of maturity, his uniform crisp. Ben had been promoted, now serving as a detective in the Oakhaven PD, though he still looked up to John with the same earnest admiration. "I still can't believe it." "John," Ben said, his voice soft, gazing at the vibrant colors of the trees. "Commander Miller, a specialized unit. It's incredible." "After everything," John smiled. A genuine, unburdened smile that reached his eyes, crinkling the corners. "It is, isn't it, Ben?" He looked out at the distant city skyline, the tall buildings glinting in the afternoon sun. It wasn't easy, facing it all. The shame, the fear of exposure. For years, I just wanted to forget that part of my life, to pretend it never happened. He turned to Ben, his gaze reflecting years of hard-won wisdom. "But in a way, Thorne did me a favor. He forced me to confront what I'd spent decades burying. He exposed my past, yes. But he also showed me that the darkness I carried wasn't a burden, but a tool. A knowledge that could be used for good. To cast light into the shadows, rather than to hide in them." He paused, a contemplative look on his face. "My father. He always told me that every experience, good or bad, shapes you, and that even the deepest shadows can be used to forge something bright. I never fully understood it until now." Ben nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. "I always knew you were a good man, John. Even when things looked bad, I just I didn't know how deep it went, how much you sacrificed. We all have our shadows. Ben, John replied, his voice soft but firm. The real test is what we do with them. Do we let them consume us, or do we learn to harness them for something better? He patted Ben on the shoulder, a gesture of camaraderie and mentorship. The quiet conversation, filled with unspoken history and newfound understanding, sealed the peace. The price of his secrets was nearly his ruin, but facing them head-on had led him to his true purpose. A new calm he hadn't dared to dream of. 2 years later, the quiet, tree-lined suburban town of Oak Haven, once shaken by the scandalous revelations surrounding its most respected officer, now proudly boasted its most effective and innovative police division, the newly formed Art and Fraud Crimes Unit. Its genesis was rooted in scandal, but its triumph was built on the bedrock of redemption, spearheaded by none other than Commander John Miller. The unit operated from a sleek, state-of-the-art facility nestled within the modern wing of the Oak Haven Police Department. A stark contrast to the dusty, forgotten corners where John once suppressed his true talents. The air within the unit buzzed with a focused, almost academic energy, a sense of shared purpose that radiated from its leader. John, now with a distinguished silvering at his temples that only added to his gravitas, moved with an assured confidence that had completely replaced his former guardedness. He was no longer just a respected officer. He was a nationally recognized expert in art forgery, financial deception, and the psychology of white-collar crime. His insights were sought after, and he was frequently invited to speak at international law enforcement conferences, advise federal agencies, and even provide expert commentary on major news outlets. His past, once a source of deep shame and a closely guarded secret, was now his most unique asset, a testament to his extraordinary journey and profound transformation. He openly shared his story, not to boast or to seek absolution, but to educate, to inspire, and to demonstrate how a past misstep, when confronted with courage and honesty, could be redeemed and converted into a powerful force for good. For his team was a meticulously hand-picked group of bright, ethically unblemished officers, all of whom shared John's unwavering commitment to justice. Among them was a now-promoted Detective Eva Rodriguez, whose initial skepticism had blossomed into unwavering trust and profound professional admiration. Having confronted her own biases and seen John's integrity firsthand, Eva had become one of his most fervent supporters, contributing her sharp investigative mind and relentless work ethic to the unit. She specialized in financial forensics, her laser-like focus complementing John's intuitive understanding of the criminal underworld. Officer Ben Carter, John's ever-loyal junior partner, had steadily risen through the ranks, now serving as the unit's second-in-command. A steady and earnest presence. He was John's shadow no longer, but his trusted right hand, a constant reminder of the quiet faith that had formed the bedrock of their early partnership. The Art and Fraud Crimes Unit had achieved remarkable success. Their meticulous investigations had led to the recovery of tens of millions in stolen and forged art, some of which had been missing for decades. They had dismantled several international forgery rings, bringing down sophisticated criminals who had eluded capture for years. Beyond the high-profile cases, the unit also focused on preventing fraud and educating the public, safeguarding Oak Haven's community from future deception. John personally mentored young officers who joined the unit, teaching them not just the intricate procedures of art forensics, but the subtle psychological nuances of the criminal mind, sharing insights he had gained from his own dark history and subsequent redemption. He established a national training program for law enforcement agencies across the country, emphasizing ethical conduct, the importance of rehabilitation, and the critical skill of turning past mistakes into future strengths. This was his paying it forward action, using his unique journey and hard-won wisdom to help shape a new generation of honest, ethical, and highly effective law enforcement professionals. One crisp autumn afternoon, as the golden light of the late afternoon sun streamed through the large bay windows of his spacious corner office, John stood in quiet contemplation. He overlooked the vibrant, thriving community of Oakhaven, its streets bustling with life, its parks filled with laughter. The trees outside were a riot of red and gold, a symbolic representation of the new season in his own life, a season of purpose, peace, and profound fulfillment. Beside him, perched on a specially designed pedestal of dark wood, was the small, tarnished silver locket he had once kept hidden beneath his floorboard. It was now openly displayed, no longer a source of shame, but a symbol of his journey. Inside, the faded photograph of his younger self alongside an older man, a stern but wise mentor figure from his past, was visible, and beneath it, the cryptic inscription on the reverse side, now polished and clear, read, "Even from darkness, light can be forged." He no longer felt shame looking at it, only a profound sense of peace, gratitude, and an unshakable understanding that every step of his journey, even the shadowed ones, had led him to this bright, purposeful second spring. He smiled, a quiet, contented smile that conveyed years of hard-won wisdom and deep inner peace. His past had not merely caught up with him, it had propelled him forward, allowing him to build a life of profound meaning and impact. The dark history had not been his undoing, but the crucible in which his true purpose was forged, allowing him to shine a brighter light than ever before. The last image shows John turning from the window, his gaze meeting Ben and Eva as they discuss a new case, a complex international art fraud. A challenge they were ready to face together. Their united front. A community protected by a man who had walked through the deepest shadows and emerged into his own brilliant light, encapsulated the story's theme that even from the darkest of pasts, a new, radiant future can be built. If this story stirred your heart, if it reminds you that courage can alter destinies and that light always finds a path even in the deepest darkness, please leave a comment. Share this story with those who need inspiration. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss our upcoming stories.